everyone. Welcome to week 4. I can't believe we're already here. I know the first few weeks must have felt like they've gone so quickly, but I hope that you're feeling that you are beginning to have some of the pieces coming together for you, especially as we move into the lesson plan assignment. So just in terms of this lecture today, I just want to point out, you're probably aware, you've probably already noticed this, but in the Foundations course, both in the lecture and in class, we model a structure of how a class can run. So typically we start with a check-in, the land acknowledgement, we share the learning goals and success criteria, and then typically follow the 3-part lesson plan that you have read about with the minds-on, the action, and consolidation. So just to put that out there, that we often model ways that you can think about your classroom and your routines and how you're going to structure your classes. So this week's lecture, just to let you know, I am going to merge the check-in with the land acknowledgement. All right, let's get started. Ontario Tech University acknowledges the lands and people of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. We are thankful to be welcomed on these lands in friendship. These lands we are situated on are covered under the Williams Treaties and the traditional territory of the Mississaugas, a branch of the Greater Anishinaabeg Nation, including Algonquin, Ojibwe, Odawa, and the Potawatomi. These lands remain home to a number of Indigenous nations and people. Throughout this program, we will be discussing the importance of using meaningful land acknowledgements and ideas and shares in your future classrooms. The Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action, in particular numbers 62 through 65, are recommendations for what educators can and need to do in our classrooms, because we have a responsibility to help move forward into reconciliation with the Indigenous peoples of Canada. So the activity I've chosen from this document is one in which we reflect on and acknowledge our relationship with the land. And this is actually an activity you could do with any age group following a land acknowledgement. It asks us, number 1, use the following prompts to generate discussion. In what ways do you use the land? Think of the many ways the land provides for you daily, from the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep. How does it make you feel? What does it do for your mind, body, or spirit? How do you show appreciation for the land? What is worthy of learning? This is a question that has been asked by scholar and educator Dr. David Perkins. This seemingly simple question can actually have quite a powerful outcome when it is used as a guide to envisioning our future classrooms and planning meaningful learning experiences. When you were asked to reflect just now, did you think back to a powerful teachable moment as a student? Did you think about how the learning experience still impacts you today and why that might be? Clearly, it was a worthwhile learning experience for you. When we ask questions like this, it compels us to consider our vision of teaching and learning. What is worthwhile? What matters most in students' lives? What will matter most in 10 years from now? To understand this question a bit better, take a moment and pause this lecture video. Go to Canvas and follow the link to Dr. David Perkins' talk on what is worthwhile learning. Consider his notion of big understandings. Perkins' question encourages us to think about what is meaningful learning. He also raises the notion of a relevance gap in our current educational contexts and argues that this is something that could work in tandem with the achievement gap. We'll talk about that more in this course. Now, clearly, when planning learning experiences, you are guided by the Ontario curriculum, but you can consider, how will you deliver the curriculum? Will you do that through a lens of decolonizing curriculum? Perhaps you will consider transformative pedagogy as your approach. And what kind of themes and topics will you use that will resonate and be relevant to your students? So remember the 3 big questions at the start of the lesson plan? Let's have a look again to refresh. The first question, what is it that you want your students to learn or be able to do, is informed by curriculum expectations, but again, it takes into consideration what is worthy of learning. How will you know that they learned what you wanted them to learn or be able to do? This is where assessment comes to bear. And how will you get them there? This is guided by effective instructional strategies. Are you still with me? I'm going to add another layer of complexity to this because when we think of all of these aspects of the planning process, we have to consider alignment. When planning an effective learning experience, we have to make sure all of these aspects are in alignment with one another. We are guided by the learning outcomes, in our case, the curriculum expectations, and these must be aligned with the instructional activities we choose in our lessons, as well as how our students will be assessed. Let's add the 3 questions to this framework. This is already a lot to take in, but remember, you can always come back to these concepts on the video and we will be returning to them in the course. Let's continue on now and look at one part of assessment, feedback. Feedback, or the feedback loop, is an integral part of the assessment process and is closely connected to instruction and instructional strategies. Over the coming weeks, you'll have some opportunities to practice feedback, such as the self-assessment of the DLP this week, as well as the peer feedback of the lesson plan. Why peer feedback for the lesson plan? Well, feedback provides information about what was done well on the lesson plan as per the assessment criteria. Feedback enables learners to adjust what they are doing in order to improve, i.e., feedback moves the learner forward and reduces the gap between current level of knowledge and skills and the expected level of knowledge and skills. The feedback provided demonstrates assessors' knowledge and understanding of the lesson plan process to date. What does effective feedback look like? Well, ideally, feedback should be specific and descriptive, be clear and concise and related to the learning goals, identify what was done well and what might need improvement, the inclusion of how the student can improve, and be given while there is still an opportunity to improve the work. So we are getting really close to your first observation and orientation week in your first placement school, and this is an exciting milestone. So before I start to talk about observation notes and practical suggestions for your observation week, I want to set the stage a little bit. So next week in week 5, we're going to begin to set up your digital field experience binder. And this binder is essentially your professional home base for everything that you will be doing and everything you'll need during your placement. So this is where you'll store your observation notes, as well as eventually your lesson plans. You'll also include things like your AT's timetable or any additional resources that you use in the lessons or anything that your AT shares with you. So it's important that we do this ahead of time so that you can stay organized once you get into your new school and get into the busy flow of school life. So observation week is not about teaching just yet. It's about orientation to your new school and classroom, as well as observation. So you'll be stepping into classrooms guided by your associate teacher, and your role will be to pay close attention to how the classroom works. What are the routines like? What kind of strategies is the associate teacher using? How do students respond to that? How do students interact with one another? Many, many things to observe, but think of this first week as training your professional lens. Observation is more than just watching what's going on in the classroom. It's about purposeful noticing. When you're in the classroom, go in with curiosity rather than judgment. This is a professional program, and your associate teachers are our partners and hosts. You're only seeing a partial picture of their class, and you don't yet have the full context for everything that's happening. So rather than evaluating, which is something we tend to automatically do, your role is to record and learn. Notice carefully. Describe what you see. And you can save your questions for reflection or later conversation with your AT. So here are some strategies to help you observe more effectively. The first is to be specific. Instead of writing, "Students were engaged," jot down exactly what you saw. For example, 12 of 15 students had their hands raised during the math discussion. 2 were whispering to each other. Those details will help you reflect more deeply later. Use attentive noticing. Pay attention to the small but powerful moments. How directions are given. How transitions from one activity to another or to another class, how do those transitions happen? Look beyond the obvious. Don't just focus on what is taught. Notice how it's taught. Watch the pacing of your associate teacher, any questioning techniques, their grouping strategies, and how the teacher perhaps moves around the room. Be sure that you address all 8 sections for your observation notes. You already have a structure for your observation notes. So as you watch, align what you're noticing with those categories. Capture your questions. Some of your most valuable notes might actually be "I wonder" questions. Those questions can become great starting points for conversations with your ATs. Observation is a skill you'll keep building over time. By being descriptive, curious, and mindful of context, you'll be ready to step into your first observation week prepared to notice, document, and learn. When you take notes in your field experience binder, please keep them organized, professional, and thoughtful. Your first field experience binder will be submitted after your return to class from observation week, and it will be assessed using the organization and professionalism rubric. Be sure to have a good look at this rubric before you go to placement. Here are the 8 observation categories you'll use for your notes. Program orientation, how the teacher organizes the learning program, subjects, and routines. Instructional strategies, the different ways students are structured, for example, inquiry groups, small groups, gallery walks, etc. Instructional materials, so these are the physical and digital resources that teachers use or the arrangement of materials. Student organization, this considers the seating, the grouping, peer learning, or even online learning structures if it's an online course. Classroom management strategies. So here are the expectations, instructional strategies, the routines, the relationships that students have with the teacher and with one another, attention signals, addressing misbehavior. There's so much in this section, and you'll likely have quite a bit here. Accommodations and modifications. So this section describes any supports for diverse learners and examples of universal design for learning in action. Teacher responsibilities outside of the classroom. This includes, depending on your grade level, yard duty, bus duty, staff meetings, communication with families, and extracurriculars. Assessment. This is ongoing, and you'll see this every day. Don't forget that there is assessment for, as, and of learning. In your FE binder, you will see more detailed instructions about each of these categories. So before we finish up today, I want to leave you with 2 things to keep in mind. First is, over the next couple of weeks, please take some time to learn a little bit about your school board that you'll be working with on your placement. This isn't an assignment, it's simply for your own professional knowledge. Building this context will help you walk into your placement school with a sense of the bigger picture of your school board. So some things you might want to consider or look into is the board's mission or vision statement. How does the board describe the student learning or community? What are some priorities that the school board has? For example, Indigenous education, mental health supports, etc. How does the board treat, or what is their commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusivity? How does the board communicate with families and communities? Are there any unique features to this board? For example, its size. Geographically, some are much larger and span more space than others. The demographics you'll want to think about too. Any specialized programs or partnerships. So those are some things we want you to look into on your own time to prepare for your placement. And then the second is just a reminder that we'll be preparing your field experience binders in week 5. And again, this is an important step so that you'll feel prepared for your observation week. So have a wonderful week, have a fantastic foundations class, and see you soon.